Greetings everyone, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, here to bring you another retro review from past seasons of The Loud House. In today's video, we look at the Season 4 episode that was bound to happen before Lori headed off to college, but the person who has trouble letting go is, well, a little conflicting. Today's episode is titled, Don't You Forget About Me. First we'll discuss the plot, and then my thoughts and critiques with my final score. So, let's get right into it. The episode begins with Lori getting a letter from Fairway University saying enrollment for the fall semester ends the following week. Feeling hesitant about going, the family decide to visit the campus so Lori can get a feel for it. Meanwhile, Lenny feels sad knowing Lori won't be around anymore and gets some advice from Lily by trying to show her older sister the downsides to going to Fairway. When that plan fails, she takes a golf uniform and begins impersonating Lori in the attempt to make the college not want to take her. When trying to steal food doesn't work, she goes to convince Coach Niblick by showing off her golf skills, and that plan achieves the opposite of what she wanted. After she starts saying she has amnesia and can't remember how to play golf, Niblick decides to revoke the scholarship he intended to give Lori. When Lenny finds out Lori will have an unlimited texting plan when she leaves, she admits to impersonating her sister and getting her scholarship taken away. They race over to Niblick's office, and Lenny tells him she was not the real Lori Loud and begs to not take away her scholarship. Niblick agrees and says he'll be seeing Lori next fall. Well, that concludes the plot of the episode, so now we come to my thoughts and critiques. This is the one episode that I knew was going to happen at some point before the end of the 4th season. Have you ever seen other shows do a similar plot where a teenager is about to move away to college and someone comes up with a plan to make sure it doesn't happen? Yeah, this episode was to be expected, and I can say it played out the way I pretty much expected it to. However, there is one thing that sort of bugs me a bit. This is one of those rare examples where we have a plot that I like to refer to as right conflict, wrong character. And the wrong character to become the focus of Lori's departure from the main cast is Lenny. Call it a rather unpopular opinion, but I never saw Lenny as the kind of character who would be the most upset about her older sister leaving. But I'll get back to that in just a moment. I will say, however, I do understand why Lenny would feel this way. After all, she and Lori have been sharing a bedroom since the beginning, they are always there for each other, and looking at episodes like Picture Perfect and Really Loud Music, it's clear their sibling relationship is the deepest out of everyone else in the family. It was natural for Lenny to feel like her relationship with Lori was going to be strained when the day finally came where her sister would be miles away. Coach Niblick talked about his own experience when his sister left for college. He said being that far apart only brought them closer, and that's what would happen for Lenny and Lori. She was never going to lose her BFF, and even Lori admits that she needs Lenny as much as she needs her, hence going all out for the unlimited texting plan. So, this begs the question, does this episode make Lenny look selfish? Well, maybe. On the one hand, it does poke a hole in past examples where Lenny comes off as someone who puts others before herself and knows how to make other people feel good. Check out the episodes One Flew Over the Loud House, Shop Girl, and no spoilers for evidence of that. On the other hand, maybe she secretly doesn't like the idea of change and thinks a change as big as Lori moving out would make her life miserable. Given how upset she was at such an idea, it does seem a little believable. So, was she being selfish but with good intentions? That's sort of debatable, but that's what makes her character conflicting in this episode. She never gave us a reason in the past to make us think she would stoop so low and rob her sister of a great opportunity just to satisfy her need to have Lori around 24/7. So, you might be thinking, well, if not Lenny, then who should have been the one to cost Lori her scholarship? Simple, Lola. Yes, I believe this episode could have been a tad more realistic if Lola had been the one to prevent Lori from going to Fairway. Why? Well, think back to the episode Garage Band, where Lola says, and I quote, "You can't leave! We need you!" Clearly, she appeared to be the one sibling most upset about the idea of Lori simply moving into the garage. Just imagine how crazy she'd go if her big sister was planning to move miles away. She could have tried to convince Lori about how ugly the uniforms were, how dirty the swimming pool was, and how awful it would be to share a bathroom with so many people, but how would she be able to convince Niblick. She goes for plan B. Have Carol Pingree either impersonate Lori by showing off a poor golfing performance, or convince the coach to not give the scholarship to Lori and give it to Carol, since the episode Selfie Improvement, where Lori loses the game, shows how talented she is at golf. You know, it makes you wonder why Carol was never on the high school golf team if she was that good. Not the point. Lori could have a run-in with Carol, find out what she and Lola did, and then Lola admits her anxiety about Lori leaving, and then the conflict gets resolved more or less the same way, with everyone reconciling in the end. There was a solid enough foundation from season 2 for Lola to replace Lenny in this episode, and seeing how young Lola is, it would be a little more believable for a 6-year-old to feel anxious about their older sister leaving. Instead, we find out Lola can't wait to leave Royal Woods when she grows up, and says her dad cannot sport a hat. Meh, it was whatever. The only other problem I have with this episode is how Niblick finally got it. Couldn't realize the girl he was standing next to in this episode was not the same girl he first met in Driving Ambition. I don't know how much time separates the two episodes, but it must have been long enough for him to forget what Lori looked like. I personally didn't care for the character completely oblivious to the fact the person they see is not the person they think trope or whatever it's called. It seemed a little forced for the plot. If this was the Lola Carol storyline idea, at least Pingree looks similar enough to make anyone think she is the real Lori Loud. Now that I would believe. The last thing about this episode would be the cameos from Ronnie Ann, Sergio, and Carlos. This being the only time the Casagrande family interact with the Louds all season. It was great seeing Lincoln reunite with his friend, and for what it was worth, the scenes with them making skate videos were fun little cutaways. They didn't really add much to the story, but at least their appearances didn't take up too much airtime. So that's good. Overall, this episode is honestly not that bad. While I still believe there were enough grounds from previous episodes to make this story about Lola not wanting Lori to go to college and getting Carol to make sure that didn't happen, I judge the episode on its own merits. And they're fine. Even if Lenny would have to eventually leave the house the day she leaves for college, because she's only one grade behind Lori, and how you would think a 16 going on 17-year-old girl would be a little bit more mature to handle the fact her older sister won't be around every day, I still understand why she did what she did. Speaking from personal experience, although I never planned on costing my own brother the chance to go to college, I can relate to the idea of missing an older sibling and sorta wishing they didn't have to leave. However, much like me, Lenny had to come to terms with how things need to change at some point, and with change comes growth. That's something to remember when the season 5 episode Schooled comes along, and how Lenny has to learn to not be so reliant on Lori. The episode may have been conflicting for Lenny's character, given how her behavior here was nothing like we saw in previous episodes, but on the whole, this does add another layer to who she is, and it does help in her development. The story itself wasn't all that bad either. Sorta predictable, but not in a terrible way. Aside from the critiques about Niblick, he was still the voice of reason, just like Lori, and you always have to appreciate those Casagrande cameos. With that said, I give Don't You Forget About Me an 8.8 out of 10. Well folks, that concludes my review of Don't You Forget About Me. As they say, if you love someone, set them free. But if possible, try to get yourself the unlimited data plan so you can still stay connected. If only we were that lucky. If only. So what did you guys think of it? Love it? Hate it? Something you would add? Change? Keep it as it is? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to this channel for the latest Loud House content. That's going to do it for me. I'll catch you guys for the next video, but until then, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, signing off. Peace out, home slices.